Welcome to season 6 of Outstanding Women Leaders, Witty and Wise Conversations. I'm your host, Katie Eads, founder and chief owl at Outstanding Women Leaders Professional Coaching and Podcast, an organization dedicated to empowering women in leadership, relationships, and life. Owl is on a mission to host 100 million witty and wise conversations that inspire you, disrupt the way leaders think, and stir your soul into aligned action. 4 rules to guide our conversation today. Nobody gets to be right. Nobody gets to be wrong. Everybody gets to be vulnerable. And my favorite, everything is included. We do not edit here. This conversation is exactly what it needs to be in this moment in time. There is space for you. You will be heard. When this conversation comes to a close, I will ask our guest 3 questions. If you've tuned in before, you know what they are. If you haven't, you don't want to miss them. But enough about me. Today, I'm excited to welcome Outstanding Women Leader, Sue Rizzello, the founder of UK agency Remedy Marketing, which is celebrating its 20th anniversary this year. Remedy helps technology and service organizations market through the power of proof. First, by using customer voices through case studies, and second, by turning their experiences, insights, and opinions into thought leadership. Sue believes these 2 things can differentiate a business more powerfully than anything else. Her 35-year career spans global PR agencies, corporate marketing roles, and the launch of major technology brands and initiatives, including Bluetooth and the DVD, before creating the kind of agency she always wished she could find client-side. One that genuinely helps rather than adds burden, and that can think for itself. Raised by artist parents, she brings a questioning mindset and creative streak to her work, as well as being a prolific writer and wordsmith. She spent time in the art world running her late father's sculpture studio to ensure his final works were complete, curating silver and gold exhibitions in London's famous Cork Street, and curating a major retrospective at the Mall Galleries in the Royal Mall. Today, she's a jewelry designer and the budding silversmith in her spare time. Sue is an advocate for women, not just as entrepreneurs, but in relation to their health. A late-stage ovarian cancer survivor, she is also a vocal campaigner and media spokesperson on ovarian cancer, often seen in parliamentary cross-party action groups asking awkward questions of policymakers. Welcome, Sue. You have done so much. We're so excited to dive into your story and learn more today.
Thank you, Katie. I'm glad to be here. I must admit, it's quite strange hearing your biography read back to you because it does seem like an awful lot, doesn't it?
Yes, and what a great career you've had. Whenever I bring on founders of companies that have been around for 20 years, which is quite the feat given we've survived COVID, we survived the crash of '08. Tell me a little bit about how you got started and what made you say, I want to be a founder and take the leap and build my own thing.
Well, it goes back to quite a long way. I have been in agencies all my working career, for most of that 35 years, and agency life looks very different from corporate life. And it was only when I became a corporate marketing leader that I realized how agencies really needed to serve me. And I couldn't find the ones that really helped me in my job. It changed my view completely of what an agency should be. I had many agencies working for me in all aspects of marketing. And by and large, they made my life very difficult. They added extra work a lot of the time. They didn't always think for themselves. They waited to be handed work. And I thought if I ever have an agency of my own, I don't want it to be like that. And so when a few years later I got the chance to do that, I thought, well, now is the time. So I started an agency and decided it wasn't going to be the same.
Hmm. And I love the agency world because I live with a marketer as well, and I also work in corporate, well, with corporate folks, so I hear those pain points oftentimes. Tell us a little bit about the agency that you've created and how it stands out and really differentiates itself.
Well, I like to think that we're different, but every agency likes to think that they are different from all the rest. All you can do really when you found any business is decide where you're going to stand and what you're going to believe in. And Remedy it's gone through a number of changes over the years. It started as a PR agency. That communication centric view of the marketing world means that we are a bit different from some others who may look at it through a sort of paid and digital marketing lens. But that in itself is not enough to differentiate you. I realized some years ago that case studies were among the most powerful pieces of marketing content that we were creating for people. And the more that we created, the more that belief became embedded. One client, actually, we still effectively have the same client 20 years on. They were the first client. We did 50 plus case studies for them, telling their success stories in the voices of their customers through interviews and asking what gave the value to them. And they became among the most powerful lead generation tools that this
Mm.
software company had. And I became more and more convinced that actually the voices of your customers can sell for you, can convince your audience far more than any sales messaging ever can, no matter how carefully crafted it may be. And so the idea of proof at the center of, sort of your messages to the world became embedded because of case studies. Then I became interested in thought leadership as well. And actually, that's another form of proof. So where a case study will help you prove the value you give to your customers, thought leadership and the activities you engage in around that are about proving what makes you different, proving how you think that is unique. So given that every business, certainly every business to business organization, complains regularly that the challenge is differentiating ourselves from everybody else, especially in crowded categories. Well, this is the way to do it. So proof marketing became the center of our world, and for the last decade or so, that has been the case. So we've built a reputation up for doing that kind of marketing.
Mm. You said something there that perked my ears up about software companies and this being a great lead gen tool for them. And oftentimes, what I see for software developers is I developed a software, let me go find a client. Versus I know what the client's pain points are, which is to speak to what you built as an agency. Let me now go and bring some case studies to show how I can support that. Give me a little example of how you maybe enter working with a software company on how to bring that proof to the center, because sometimes the customer's voice gets lost in the technology.
It absolutely does. I mean, there is a habitual problem in the software industry. It's not limited to software. Many companies do this, of thinking that case studies are a way of sort of proving that we exist, proving that we work in a particular sector, proving that we have the best piece of software. And the problem with that is that they're thinking about themselves first. Good case studies and the ones that really bring platforms and systems alive are the ones where it's not about the software, it's actually about the business problems that the software resolved. And it doesn't matter if you're talking about software, you're talking about or about any other business service or accountancy or personnel services. It's the customer's problem that actually should be the center of your universe, not your product. So when companies go out and try and write their own case studies, they go, let's write, well, what was the problem we were solving? What was the solution we brought to the table? What was the benefit that gave to the client? And they forget the voice that to even ask that customer for their input. And what happens is that all you get is a regurgitation of all their sales messaging. So
Hmm.
what you really need, you asked about how you bring that customer voice to the center. It's get somebody else to do it for you, because you will not ask your customer the right questions because you see your world from your company out, your brand, your product, your solution.
Mm. It's Questions is my business. So you're correct. People don't ask the right questions. When I coached some consultants, I learned that consultants were like, oh, I never thought about asking questions. I thought that's what we were doing in consulting. No, we're telling people what to do.
You're right.
So,
It's absolutely the same problem.
hmm. So you take a leap of like I want to just go back a minute. You took a leap and left corporate then to found a company. Uh, being a woman and founding a company can feel a bit scary. What made you feel like this was guaranteed to be successful? Any case studies that you had to suggest that this is the direction to go?
No, I can't say that I founded the business based on anything other than a leap of faith and a sort of belief in that I could do anything. So much so that I'm a terrible multitasker. So I started an agency on the top floor of a building. I started an art gallery on the first floor of the building, and I started a shop on the ground floor of the building. Because I thought that three in one was a good idea at the time, and of course it wasn't. It was, in 2008, in the recession, it all came tumbling down. Um, but the agency was viable, so it was blind faith and ignorance, I think,
Mm,
is why I started it. I wasn't scared. Um, I think starting a business as a woman isn't always easy. Um, but given the right support, it should be easy. The reality is a lot of female founders don't get that support, and they don't necessarily aren't necessarily given the emotional support or the financial support to get off the ground.
And do you mind if I ask how old were you when you founded the company?
Um, oh gosh,
You
I'd
can
have
give
to
me a
work it
decade.
out. I'd have to work it out. I was about 40, 39, 40, something like that.
Yes.
So
Yes.
from that, you'll gather I'm getting quite old now.
Well, the reason I asked to inspire our listeners is there are so many women that want to exit corporate and do what you've done. And I remember when I sold my first company in 2015, I was 32, and I'm like, I can't go back to college and get a master's degree. I have to keep making money. I'm 32. I could have easily gone back to school at 32. But oftentimes you get to a certain age, like, well, I'm in my 40s. Like, am I really going to start a business? And a case study, successful founders, the average age is 45. And we always forget the success part. Any old asshole could found a company.
Yeah,
But
and
when
many
you're
do,
looking,
and mo most people, many don't survive. I mean, the vast
that's right.
majority of small businesses do not
90%
survive.
do not survive. That's right. It's when you meet someone who's not only survived, but survived through two very tough times, because marketing is the budget that always gets cut, except the one place I worked where they cut me and director of business development, and they spent marketing, they kept their marketing person. They closed their doors 2 years later. Like usually you don't keep your marketing. So I imagine that you've got a pretty good secret sauce to be able to survive and weather that climate. What type of supports have you found over the years to, and are you a single co-founder or do you have a partner?
I'm a single co-founder, uh, but I've had the benefit of working with some amazing people over the years, and I think the biggest support I've probably had is from my husband, who even when the times were at their worst, and there have been times where I just thought I'm just going to give up, and he was so convinced that my difficult streak would mean that I wouldn't give up once I woke up again in the morning. So he just kept me going. He's the biggest support. I haven't had any financial support from anybody. Um, I've never considered actually looking for that financial investment. I think it would be it would certainly be possible. I think there are some barriers for female-founded businesses in getting investment funding. That is, it shouldn't be the case, but it is borne out by the
Mhm.
reality of the statistics. Um, so no, so yes, it's just
Yeah.
me and my team.
That's how, and you mentioned husband. I always say the same thing. Historically, what is a woman without her king more powerful? And yet, if you want to be a successful female CEO, somebody has to be there to help make dinner occasionally.
They do. Well, mine makes dinner all the time because
So does mine.
I was very smart though. I married a chef. So uh
Ah.
yes,
I married a man who wants to retire into being a chef when he's done with his marketing career.
it's good. It's very useful.
Tell me a little bit about, so if I'm founding a company, I work with a lot of people who are founding companies. When does someone bring in somebody like you? And what are some of the things that founders can think about that you think about that they might not be in order to set themselves up for success?
Okay, it's interesting that this question of when to hire marketing expertise comes up a lot, my answer in general is as early as you can get started thinking about marketing. However, hiring an agency, so hiring a sort of a serious marketer needs to wait until the business is mature enough to work with a marketer. And sometimes people leap a little early. Um, they decide, people get to a stage where they decide it's time to put effort into the marketing. And what they tend to do is then spend quite a lot of money on getting their logo upgraded and, getting a new website because they've decided to start marketing. Um, and they often do it in the wrong order. You could do with advice early on, but early on you will not be able to afford ongoing marketing support from a professional. The the path, therefore, that a lot of early stage businesses go down, again, in my view, too early, is to hire a marketer, hire somebody junior to do the marketing. And what they have is they have somebody working very, very hard, but without the experience, without the sort of decades of experience that an agency might bring or an experienced freelancer might bring. And again, the result is they tend to spend a lot of money too early on the wrong things. Early stage businesses almost always do what I call scattergun marketing. They try a little bit of this, they try a little bit of that, they spend some money here, they go to an expensive event there, and a lot of that early investment tends to be lost. It tends to be wasted, feel like wasted money, and it often puts them off marketing for a few years. So people often start marketing, then they stop doing it for a while until they get to a point where they go, no, we've really got to do this properly now. And then they start again. And usually that second start is when they start to do things properly because they know the value of bringing in the right skills.
Hmm. And I want to dive in a little bit to the case studies that you do. What I found so interesting about how you've set yourself apart is exactly how I've built the business that I've built as well. Coaching is $1 billion industry, but there's like 5 to 10% of us that are getting most of that from the industry. And I hear two reasons why clients always say they pick me. One is the testimonials. So client, and I'm getting better at documenting more case studies for businesses if they want to work with me. But and then the second one is I'm funny, and a lot of times people in corporate just know they need a good laugh. So I'd love to hear a little bit from you and like what you've noticed from a case study of like once you start to bring these in, how does this really elevate a software company? How does this help people in tech who don't traditionally know anything about marketing? I know I just had conversations with some of them last week and to look at marketing as that's just something you spend when you get somewhere. Like tell me a little bit about like the case study process and like what it really does for a business.
Okay. Um, it's very interesting with case studies because every business thinks they know what case studies are. And what they do when they start to document case studies is they tend to think of them as pieces of marketing content. To me, they're not pieces of marketing content, and if they should be approached in a way that is purposed to create a business asset rather than a piece of marketing content. So our process for this is to try to identify stories which are going to be really valuable as sales assets and then develop them in such a way that they actually can be that. And that means capturing a really rich story. Picking the right story is one of the key things, and it's not necessarily the biggest brand that you have on your client roster, on your customer roster. It's the best story. People should be starting with the best story, the one where they overcame problems with the clients, are so much more interesting to the marketplace than the one which went perfectly swimmingly and was for the gigantic, sort of
Mm.
drinks corporation they worked with. Um, Real stories, talking to real people and letting their voices shine through. That's why case studies are so powerful. You can, so if you do a first person interview based case study, create a really rich text based case study, you can capture a vast amount of information, far more than you could ever capture if you did, for example, a video testimonial. People think video first these days, and video is incredibly powerful. And I completely agree, it has to be part of the mix when you're thinking case studies, but it's not the place to start. If you
Mm.
start with text, if you start with that interview, you're creating an advocate for your business that you can return to again and again. And you're creating an asset that can then be used at almost every stage of sales. Because that's what it's really about. It's about harnessing the proof in your business that can actually help you to generate revenue, that can help you grow. You can't therefore simply start out by thinking, let's have a case study because it's going to make us look really good.
Mm. Yes, I have seen those. When I compare them across. And I love that you mentioned picking the best story. I always say the best stories write themselves. And
They do.
I was an executive director in a nonprofit. How do you pull on a lever and ask someone to give you money and get nothing in return as you tell a really good story?
Absolutely. Yeah, all these things are true in thought leadership as well, because you don't want to just go out with a great missionary agenda. You've got to tell people stories which are going to engage them, which are going to resonate with them, where they're going to read them or
Mm,
see them or hear them and think, that's me, that we've got that problem. That's
yeah.
that's really what you're after. That's the secret power of case studies, that ability to resonate with the problems that your target customers are worrying about and thinking about. They're not necessarily the same things they write on an RFP.
Mm.
They're but it's the thing that gets you your the attention. It piques their attention.
Yeah, as you talk, makes me think of the one testimonial that I get referenced the most, and it reads like a story. She says that I helped her get back in touch with that inner goddess that she just forgets exists, and I can't tell you how many women have, that language is something that spoke to them, and I didn't think anything of it when I put that testimonial up until I just kept hearing people say, it just really sounded like you would get me. It sounds like you're not selling software, is what I hear, and perhaps that's the message that every founder needs to hear: is that you're not selling a product.
Absolutely. You're not selling a product, you're not selling a service. So certainly that's true in software. You're always selling the story of how it helped overcome something. But it's the same for any kind of product or service. The stories do write themselves. I mean, that is absolutely the case. We don't have any sort of set structured questioning process for a questioning set. We have a
Mhm.
process, but it is developed uniquely every time we're briefed on a new case study, because the point is to bring the story out. So what I want to know from my clients is, what are the anecdotes that we want the client to tell? What are the pains than the extraordinary things that you encountered that you want them to remember that they've probably forgotten? Because if we can tease those out of the conversation that we have in the interview, it brings these stories to life. And I constantly hear that from our clients is exactly that, is how did you get them to bring the story to life like that? And
Mm.
the answer is, I just let them talk. You
Isn't
let
that
people
funny that
talk.
it's never occurred to people just shut up?
I know, and not talk about themselves. So yeah, it's a fascinating process, and I find that I mean the reason that I have the accountancy firm that I do for my agency is because they took us on to do a trio of case studies for them a few years ago, and in those first three interviews, I got such accountant envy. I wanted the accountant that these people were telling me about. So after I finished that, I approached them and I said, "Can I become a client of yours?" And I did the same thing with our recruitment consultant. So I'm perhaps I'm too easily swayed, but I fall for these stories hook, line, and sinker. Every time I want to become a buyer because when the customer is talking about them in really enthusiastic terms, you can't help but be compelled by it.
Hmm. And you mentioned video, how do you take what you capture in words and video? Do you do that as well with your agency? Like, yeah.
Yeah, we do. I have a complete framework for exploiting case studies because one of the things that one has to do increasingly is demonstrate the return on investment on any marketing spend. You will understand that.
Mhm.
Um, and a piece of copy is not something that can be an asset that you can sweat. A case study that's planned into a model to exploit it at different stages and in different formats is what is an asset that you can see value has actually does hold actual value, and video is one of the forms to with which you can do that. Um, you can turn text into anything. You can turn it into visuals. You can turn it
Hmm.
into pictures. You can turn it into animation. You can turn it into audio, and you can certainly turn it into video. So we tend to do a spotlight reel about every case study we do. But that's very different from a talking head interview. Once somebody has done an in-depth case study interview, the chances of them agreeing to a video interview are much, much higher because they've already decided to endorse you publicly. That barrier has gone. They've already remembered all the reasons that they enjoyed working with you or that your solution was good for them. So that barrier has gone. And they've all rehearsed all the words. They've even rehearsed the words that they use, and they've seen it and they've liked it and they've signed it off, and it's great. The video is really very, very easy as a second step. It can be incredibly hard if you do that as the first step, and it limits what you can do with it. So we do video, but and we do it as a sort of separate additional exercise because case studies shouldn't just be the end of the story. They need to be the beginning of the story where
Hmm.
you carry on working with your customer so that they become a true evangelist for your business. And if you do case studies well, people really enjoy it. They're incredibly flattered to be asked. If you make them look good in a case study interview, that only helps your customer relationship.
Yeah, and it gives them marketing as well because their company gets to be on there. What are some of the mistakes that you see people making in case studies?
Well, I think the biggest one is the writing it yourself. The second goes with that, which is taking it in a formulaic well, the way, the problem, the solution, the benefit. And now let's ask the customer for a few words that we can put at the end of the case study. You often see that, the single sort of quote at the end. Um, People fail to get endorsement and agreement to do case studies early enough and from a senior enough level. So a lot of case studies fall down at the approval stage because you discover that the person who agreed the case study was simply not senior enough in their organization to have the authority to agree an external endorsement. That becomes a huge problem with larger brands. I recently had a case study with a large scientific establishment of global renown that took a year of many, many edits. It went through 12 or 13 versions before, right at the end, they said, well, actually, we don't really do endorsements like this, so we're just going to cancel it. That was a year of wasted time and investment for my client, who was a hardware manufacturer.
Mm,
And that can't be helped, but if you can head off those problems early on, you avoid all that pain.
yeah. And do anonymous case studies have any weight, or are you really looking for needing that endorsement?
It depends on the story. It depends.
Mm,
If you have a good enough story, it can hold up and still be a useful asset that you can still exploit in all the same ways. As long as it is based on real quotes. So an interview that is then anonymized tends to create something that can be a usable asset. A story that you simply write up about an unnamed company, an unnamed large engineering company we worked with to do this with, that's not going to have very much value at all.
mm,
But if the story is good, people can tell it's a real story. This is the thing.
yeah.
Again, the same facets come through as with a named case study interview. You can still get a lot of value out of it.
Yes, I've learned a lot from you and today, and I really, want to just highlight again, agencies need to serve corporate. If I'm a corporate, if I work in corporate, if I'm looking at RFPs, if I'm deciding on an agency, what are some of the mistakes that you see that corporate even makes on determining who the right agency is for them?
Um, They don't compare like with like when they go shopping for an agency of a particular kind. We're often asked to just tell us what would you do? How would you help us? What would you do? Instead of
Mm,
working off a really specific brief. That means that if they talk to three agencies, five agencies in a similar space, they're going to get five uncomparable inputs, and they end up just going with the one that they feel is right. People end up going with the chemistry rather than the chemistry and the capability, the two things should go together. So I think that is one of the biggest problems that they have.
yeah.
Not thinking long term enough is the other thing. Very short appointments don't enable relationships to really start to generate enough value. So swapping agencies every 6 months, every year, as some companies do, nobody has a chance to really deliver value.
So what I hear is corporate needs to get really clear on what the ROI and value is that they want to deliver, and then see
Yeah.
what strategy they think can deliver that. Do you see clients that are better fit for case studies? I know, and when we have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. Case studies can't always be the answer, but where do you see where this really is the determining factor, and being able to support a sales enablement team, for example, or being able to really increase your sales?
I have to say, particularly in sectors which are quite commoditized, there is a vast amount of value in case studies because it comes back to the differentiation factor that I mentioned at the outset. Um, when you have 10 companies that you could work with, you have no idea who you should work with. So you must rely on your instincts, and people do. Um, it's with corporate, you also have the procurement factor to deal with as well. And actually, for procurement, it being able to provide a bank of case studies is a very, very useful backup because even procurement teams who will go through a tick box process to compare like with like and so on, the case studies can differentiate. I used to think that procurement teams didn't really care about that sort of thing, that value-based differentiation. But actually, in recent years I have seen that they are. They really are. It gives them a degree of confidence in rating and recommending particular choices over other choices.
No, and bringing that in with your jewelry making background and the art background, what I really hear is that you come in and create a unique piece of jewelry for every single client that you work with. You are quite the artist in every capacity, which is very unique.
In some ways, I mean, good marketing should really be bespoke. Off the shelf, buying off the shelf campaigns, as I'm sure you know, it's simply it's not the case. Marketing is a bespoke oriented industry because you have to shape the strategy around what the client company needs to do. It will always be unique. So yes, I suppose there's a design element in it. I often I use art and design in all my work. I'm forever drawing things in pictures that other people will talk about in words. I'd rather illustrate it and create a framework and create a graphic to show how a campaign holds together than write a long document about it.
Hmm. And on top of all of that, you're also a cancer survivor. And you're not the first person I've had on here. I'd love for you to share maybe a little bit about your journey of navigating a company while also, I assume this was happening at the same time. Yeah.
Yes, it did, and it was one of the the dips, one of the crises I've had to navigate because I had to make a lot of changes very quickly. I had to virtualize the company, get rid of the office because I knew I would be out for, 18 months to 2 years. I never uh, intended not to go back to work. I never intended to stop working. And in fact, I worked all the way through my chemo treatment. Um, it's a bit foggy what I actually did because I have very little memory of what happened in that year. But I kept all the clients. I did a lot of writing. I obviously didn't go to meetings. And it was before a lot of remote working was kind of normal, so there were no video meetings or anything. Um, but somehow, yeah, somehow I got through that. I learned the value of things like key man insurance for my business, which I didn't have. So it was a huge financial shock to the
Mhm.
business. But yeah, somehow got through it and got to the other side and managed not to lose my clients in the process.
Wow. And now you advocate and do some healthcare campaigns for women. I imagine you are quite the case study in that as well.
I am. I mean, I had ovarian cancer, and any cancer survivor who's dealt with the media will tell you that when you go to do an interview about cancer experience, you tend to be cast in this mold of a victim. They think about you as a victim that they're interviewing, and I don't like that. I won't have that. I want it to be much more proactive. I'm not there really to talk about me and poor me and my experience. I'm there to talk about the women whose lives are lost to ovarian cancer every year. There are far too many of them. Diagnosis is far too late, far later than it should be. That's certainly the case in the UK. I understand that it's also the case in the US. And that's something, it's a global problem.
Yeah,
So,
I had a woman on my podcast in I think season 2 or 3 who has the Ovarian Cancer Project. I'll send you a link to her. Very similar story in regards to how late stage and how it was found, and also her advocacy work that she's been doing here in the US.
yes, well, yes, it's interesting when you start to speak out about things like this. But I go to uh, every all cross-party parliamentary group on ovarian cancer that I can get to, just because it's the only opportunity you have to ask difficult questions.
Mm.
Policymakers too often just ignore this sort of thing, and it's a chance to make sure that they can't. So that's all I can do.
Yes. Parliament forgets that a parliament is really just a group of owls, which is outstanding women leaders, not men.
That's true, a parliament of owls.
As we wrap up today, I have my three questions. What is your superpower?
Oh, that's interesting. Maybe it's probably seeing things other people don't.
Mm,
So it's a bit like sort of seeing the value in the best story, not the biggest brand. I see a lot of things that other people miss, and companies, they see a project that they want to write up. I see this amazing stack of potential interest that's stacked up in that story. So I go chasing that. They're after a case study. I'm after the value. But yeah, because at the end of the day, my job is to turn it into content that interests people, that's interesting, that's not boring.
mm. And what's your purpose?
Definitely to make marketing less fluffy.
Ah,
Uh, well, no, what I mean by that is that a lot of marketing activities that cost a lot of money are done, but that actually don't do anything that's that helpful. Um, obviously visibility or brand visibility and everything's very important, but the stuff that moves the needle is arguably more important because marketing's supposed to be a business function. It's not supposed to be a nice to have. It's not the icing on the cake, it's the cake. It's part of the cake. It's a slice of the cake. There you go. It's a terrible analogy.
I think that's so important. That last business I talked about that I worked at, where they let the business development person go. When I was talking to the marketing director, she said, "Oh, I don't know the numbers. I just write the content." I thought, well, you don't know anything.
Yeah.
And that's the part that is missed is that marketing is a lever. The amount of times that people have said directly for me a testament, like a word in a testimonial, like to me, those are ROIs of why somebody has chosen me. So I think it's I love that purpose of taking out the fluff and recognizing like everybody buys an emotion. They use logic to support the buying strategy,
Yeah.
but they're all buying an emotion. And my favorite nonprofit communications tip is if you send a nonprofit letter and you use the word you 30 times, the letter that said you 31 times will outperform the letter that said it 30 times. People really want to see themselves in a story, which is what the word
They
you
do.
does. Yeah.
Absolutely. That's absolutely right. Yes, but marketing unfortunately has a reputation for being fluffy, and lots of my colleagues unfortunately don't do anything to disabuse them. My husband every morning says, "You're off to the glitter mines again, then."
I would think I like your husband. He sounds great.
Yeah.
uh, Off to the glitter mines. Yeah. And well,
Yeah.
and marketing is, at its essence, is just attracting attention, which is what glitter does.
Yeah. Yeah.
My last question, what's next for you? I mean, you have this successful agency. What's next?
It's something that we're actively working on, which is somehow making Remedy more independent of me. It's a time that comes in every business, every founder's sort of journey and the growth journey of any company, in fact, is that at some point it has to be ready to kind of fly on its own. Um, Not to use too many owl analogies, but it's got to be able to take off and it's got to be able to grow and it's got to be able to scale. So that's really my job
Mm,
this year is making it independent, creating an operational model that can scale better and leaning into all the intellectual property we have around case studies and thought leadership because it's this I spend all my time thinking about those, but right now so much of it's in my head.
hmm Yes, I just had this conversation with a founder today. And funny enough, my first coaching business was a CrossFit gym and I hired a full staff. Like I scaled. I wasn't the magic talent like you are in your business. And right now, my current business, I'm the magic talent. And when I look at this client, like she doesn't have the business that she even wants here. But my lesson learned was intellectual property first. We want to start with what that is. We don't want to have to go back or have someone steal it, which is something that also happens. And something you said earlier that I really love about your how you approach marketing is you don't have these are the questions I'm going to ask every single person. Like you might have a bit of a framework, but you are really feeling in and adjusting in real time, which is the same thing for coaching. And anytime I interview someone for marketing for my company, a lot of times they say, so I can send you the questions. I have a process. And as soon as I hear that, I know I'm getting the same thing that everybody else has gotten when you talk about a specific process. So very, very great next steps of you to look at expanding and being able to sunset your career. My first company, I didn't have an exit strategy because I thought I was just going to retire there, and then I got divorced. So I also look at companies of we have a retirement plan when we found the company. If your company doesn't have a retirement plan going in, someone will give you one, which is what happened to me. If you have business partners, at least. So best of luck to you on that next venture. This is where the fun happens, is what I always talk about with people.
Yeah. Thank you.
Uh, I like to give my guests the last word. What else, whatever you'd like to leave our audience with today.
Okay. I think don't let your value just sit there and wither. Show people, stop hiding all the
Mm.
value that you have. That value might be the ideas in your mind and the opinions you've got. It might be the value of all this amazing stuff you've done with your customers over the years. There's so much that's buried, there's so much that's unused in companies. And it doesn't matter how small the company is, it's just as true of a one man, a one woman business as it is for a larger one. So, remember that you have all this proof. Find it, bring it out, make it easy for people to see, make it easy for people to access. Don't just tell people how good you are at something, show them.
Mm.